docks of Ilion, sails furled and propelled by its sweeps. Aaron stood near the stern, watching great numbers of long-legged birds wading in the tall marsh grass that all but encircled the great harbor. He recognized the small white cranes and could guess at their much larger blue brothers, but many of the crested birds, red-feathered or rosy, some with flat bills broader than a duck's, he did not know at all. A dozen sorts of gulls swooped and soared above the harbor itself, and a black bird with a long, sharp beak skimmed just above the water, its underbeak cutting a furrow. Ships 3 and 4 times as long as the snow goose lay anchored across the expanse of the harbor, waiting their turns at the docks or for the tides to shift so they could sail beyond the long breakwater. Small fishing boats worked close to the marsh and in the creeks winding through it. 2 or 3 men in each, dragging nets on long poles, swung out from either side of the boat. The wind carried a sharp scent of salt and did little to break the heat. The sun stood well over halfway down to the horizon, but it seemed like noon. The air felt damp. It was the only way he could think of it. Damp. His nose caught the smell of fresh fish from the boats, of old fish and mud from the marsh, and the sour stink of a large tanning yard that lay on a treeless island in the marsh grass. Captain Adara muttered something softly behind him, the tiller creaked, and the snow goose changed its course a trifle. Barefoot men at the sweeps moved as if not wanting to make a sound. Bairn did not glance at them beyond a flicker of his eye. He peered at the tannery instead, watching men scrape hides stretched on rows of wooden frames, and other men lift hides out of huge, sunken vats with long sticks. Sometimes they stacked the hides on barrows, wheeling them into the long, low building at the edge of the yard. Sometimes the hides went back into the vats with an addition of liquids poured from large stone crocks. They probably made more leather in a day than was made in Emmons Field in months, and he could see another tannery on another island beyond the first. It was not that he had any real interest in ships or fishing boats or tanning yards, or even very much in the birds, though he did wonder what those pale red ones could be fishing for with their flat bills, and some of them looked good to eat unless he watched himself. But anything at all was better than watching the scene behind him on the deck of the Snow Goose. The axe at his belt was no defense against that. A stone wall wouldn't be defense enough, he thought. Moraine had been neither pleased nor displeased to discover that Zarine, I'll not call her Fail, whatever she wants to name herself, she is no falcon, knew she was Aes Sedai, though she had been perhaps a little upset with him for not telling her. A little upset. She called me a fool, but that was all. There. Moraine did not seem to care one way or another about Zarine being a hunter of the Horn. But once she learned the girl thought they would lead her to the Horn of Valere, once she learned he had known that too and not told her, Zarine had been more than forthcoming about both subjects with Moraine, to his mind. Then her cold, dark stare had taken on a quality that made him feel as if he had been packed into a barrel of snow in the dead of winter. The Aes Sedai said nothing, but she stared too often and too hard for any comfort. He looked over his shoulder and quickly returned to studying the shoreline. Zarine was sitting cross-legged on the deck near the horses tethered between the masts, her bundle and dark cloak beside her, her narrow divided skirts neatly arrayed, pretending to study the rooftops and towers of the oncoming city. Moraine was studying Ilion too, from just ahead of the men working the sweeps. But now and then she shot a hard look at the girl from under the deep hood of her fine gray wool cloak. How can she stand wearing that? His own coat was unbuttoned and his shirt unlaced at the neck. Zarine met each Aes Sedai look with a smile, but every time Moraine turned away, she swallowed and wiped her forehead. Aaron rather admired her for managing that smile when Moraine was watching. It was a good deal more than he could do. He had never seen the Aes Sedai truly lose her temper, but he himself was at the point of wishing she would shout or rage or anything but stare at him. Right, maybe not anything. Maybe the stare was bearable. Lan sat further toward the bow than Moraine. His color-shifting cloak was still in the saddlebags at his feet, outwardly absorbed in examining his sword blade, but making little effort to hide his amusement. Sometimes his lips appeared to quirk very close to a smile. Aaron was not certain. At times he thought it was only a shadow. Shadows could make a hammer seem to smile. Each woman obviously thought she was the object of that amusement, but the warder did not appear to mind the tight-lipped frowns he received from both of them. A few days earlier, Perrin had heard Moraine ask Lan, in a voice like ice, whether he saw something to laugh at. "I would never laugh at you, Moraine," said I, he had replied calmly. "But if you truly intend to send me to Morella, I must become used to smiling. I hear that Morella tells her warders jokes. Guiding must smile at their bondholders' quips. You have often given me quips to laugh at, have you not? Perhaps you would rather I stay with you after all." She had given him a look that would have nailed any other man to the mast, but the warder never blinked. Lan made cold steel seem like tin. The crew had taken to padding about their work in utter silence when Moraine and Zareen were on deck together. Captain Adara held his head tilted and looked as if he were listening for something he did not want to hear. He passed his orders in whispers instead of the shouts he had used at first. Everyone knew Moraine was Aes Sedai now, and everyone knew she was displeased. Perrin had let himself get into one shouting match with Zareen, and he was not sure which of them had said the words Aes Sedai, but the whole crew knew. Bloody woman. He was uncertain whether he meant Moraine or Zareen. If she is the Falcon, what is the Hawk supposed to be? Am I going to be stuck with two women like her? Why, no. She is not a Falcon, and this is an end to it. The only good thing he could find in all this was that with an angry Aes Sedai to worry about, none of the crew looked twice at his eyes. Loyal was nowhere in sight at the moment. The Ogier stayed in his stifling cabin whenever Moraine and Zareen were topside together, working on his notes, he said. He only came on deck at night to smoke his pipe. Perrin did not see how he could take the heat. Even Moraine and Zareen were better than being below decks. He sighed and kept his eyes on Ilion. The city the ship was approaching was large, as big as Cairhien or Camelin, the only two great cities he had ever seen, and it reared out of a huge marsh that stretched for miles like a plain of waving grass. Ilion had no walls at all, but it seemed to be all towers and palaces. The buildings were all pale stone, except for some that appeared covered with white plaster. But the stone was white and gray and reddish, and even faint shades of green. Rooftops of tiles sparkled under the sun with 100 different hues. The long docks held many ships, most dwarfing the Snow Goose, and bustled with the loading and unloading of cargo. There were shipyards at the far end of the city, where great ships stood in every stage from skeletons of thick wooden ribs to nearly ready to slide into the harbor. Perhaps Ilion was large enough to keep wolves at bay. They surely would not hunt in those marshes. The Snow Goose had outrun the wolves that had followed him from the mountains. He reached out for them gingerly now, and felt nothing. A curiously empty feeling, given that it was what he wanted. His dreams had been his own, for the most part, since that first night. Moraine had asked about them in a cold voice, and he had told the truth. Twice he had found himself in that odd sort of wolf dream, and both times Hopper had appeared, chasing him away, telling him he was too young yet, too new. What Moraine made of that, he had no idea. She told him nothing, except to say he had best be wary. "That's as well by me," he growled. He was becoming used to Hopper being dead, but not dead, in the wolf dreams at least. Behind him, he heard Captain Adara scuff his boots on the deck and mutter something, startled that anyone would speak aloud. Lines were hurled ashore from the ship. While they were still being made fast to stone posts along the docks, the slightly built captain leaped into motion, whispering fiercely to his crew. He had booms rigged to lift the horses onto the wharf almost as quickly as the gangplank was in place. Lan's black warhorse kicked and nearly broke the boom hoisting him. Loyal's huge, hairy fetlock mount needed two. "An honor," Adara whispered to Moraine with a bow as she stepped onto the wide plank leading to the dock. "An honor to have served you, Aes Sedai." She strode ashore without looking at him, her face hidden in her deep hood. Loyal did not appear until everyone else was on the dock, and the horses too. The Ogier came thumping up the gangplank, trying to don his long coat, while carrying his big saddlebags and striped blanket roll, and his cloak over one arm. I did not know we had arrived, he rumbled breathlessly. I was rereading my... He trailed off with a glance at Moraine. She appeared to be absorbed in watching Lang battle all these, but the Ogier's ears looked like a nervous cat's. His notes, Perrin thought. One of these days I have to see what he is saying about all this. Something tickled the back of his neck, and he jumped a foot before he realized he was smelling a clean, herbal scent through the spices and tar and stinks of the docks. Zareen wiggled her fingers, smiling at them. If I can do that with just a brush of my fingers, farm boy, I wonder how high you would jump. He was growing a little tired of considering looks from those dark, tilted eyes. She may be pretty, but she looks at me the way I'd look at a tool I'd never seen before, trying to puzzle out how it was made and what it was supposed to be used for. Zareen. Moraine's voice was cool but unruffled. I am called Fail, Zareen said firmly, and for a moment, with her bold nose, she did look like a falcon. Zareen, Moraine said firmly, it is time for our ways to part. You will find better hunting elsewhere and safer. I think not, Zareen said just as firmly. A hunter must follow the trail she sees, and no hunter would ignore the trail you four leave. And I am Fail. She spoiled it a bit by swallowing, but she did not blink as she met Moraine's eyes. Are you certain? Moraine said softly. Are you sure you will not change your mind, Falcon? I will not. There is nothing you or your stone-faced warder can do to stop me. Zareen hesitated, then added slowly, as if she had decided to be entirely truthful, At least there is nothing that you will do that can stop me. I know a little of Aes Sedai. I know for all the stories that there are things you will not do. And I do not believe Stoneface would do what he must to make me give over. Are you sure enough of that to risk it? Lan spoke quietly, and his face did not change, but Zareen swallowed again. There is no need to threaten her, Lan, Perrin said. He was surprised to realize he was glaring at the warder. Moraine's glance silenced him and the warder both. You believe you know what an Aes Sedai will not do you? She said more softly than before. Her smile was not pleasant. If you wish to go with us, this is what you must do. Lan's eyelids flickered in surprise. The two women stared at each other like falcon and mouse, but Zareen was not the falcon now. You will swear by your hunter's oath to do as I say, to heed me, and not to leave us. Once you know more than you should of what we do, I will not allow you to fall into the wrong hands. Know that for truth, girl. You will swear to act as one of us, and do nothing that will endanger our purpose. You will ask no questions of where we go or why. You will be satisfied with what I choose to tell you. All of this you will swear, or you will remain here in Ilion, and you will not leave this marsh until I return to release you, if it takes the rest of your life. That I swear. Zareen turned her head uneasily, watching Moraine out of one eye. I may accompany you if I swear? The Aes Sedai nodded. I will be one of you, the same as Loyal or Stoneface. But I can ask no questions. Are they allowed to ask questions? Moraine's face lost a little of its patience. Zareen stood up straighter and held her head high. Very well, then. I swear, by the oath I took as a hunter. If I break one, I will have broken both. I swear it. Done, Moraine said, touching the younger woman's forehead. Zareen shivered. Since you brought her to us, Perrin, she is your responsibility. Mine? He yelped. I am no one's responsibility but my own, Zareen nearly shouted. The Aes Sedai went serenely on, as if they had never opened their mouths. It seems you have found Min's falcon, Ta'Veren. I have tried to discourage her, but it appears she will perch on your shoulder whatever I do. The pattern weaves a future for you, it seems. Yet remember this. If I must, I will snip your thread from the pattern, And if the girl endangers what must be, you will share her fate. I did not ask for her to come along, Perrin protested. Lorraine calmly mounted Aldiv, adjusting her cloak over the white mare's saddle. I did not ask for her. Loyal shrugged at him and silently mouthed something, no doubt a saying about the dangers of angering Aes Sedai. You are to Viren, Zareen said disbelievingly. Her gaze ran over his sturdy country clothes and settled on his yellow eyes. Well, perhaps. Whatever you are, she threatens you as easily as she does me. Who is Min? What does she mean I will perch on your shoulder? Her face tightened. If you try making me your responsibility, I will carve your ears. Do you hear me? Grimacing, he slipped his unstrung bow under the saddle girths along Stepper's flank and climbed into the saddle. Restive after days on the ship, the Dun lived up to his name until Perrin calmed him with a firm hand on the reins and pats to his neck. None of that deserves an answer, he growled. Min bloody told her. Burn you, Min. Burn you too, Moraine. And Zareen. He could never remember Rand or Mat being bullied by women on every side, or himself before leaving Emond's Field. Nynaeve had been the only one, and Mistress Luhan, of course. She ran him and Master Luhan both, everywhere but in the smithy. And Egwene had had a way about her, though mostly with Rand. Mistress Alvir, Egwene's mother, always had a smile, but things seemed to end up being done as she wanted too. And the women's circle had looked over everybody's shoulder. Grumbling to himself, he reached down and took Zareen by an arm. She gave a squawk and nearly dropped her bundle as he hoisted her up behind his saddle. Those divided skirts of hers made it easy for her to straddle Stepper. Moraine will have to buy you a horse, he muttered. You cannot walk the whole way. You are strong, blacksmith, Zareen said, rubbing her arm. But I am not a piece of iron. She shifted around, stuffing her bundle.
Hey, Rise Above, how you doing?
I can buy my own horse if I need one. The whole way where?
I'm not doing too bad.
I love
the Wheel of Time series too.
The Ogier looked back at Perrin. No questions, remember?
I've read the series a couple times over already.
Or blacksmith or anything
I figure I do this at night anyway before I go to bed. Might as well let everyone else
shaggy hair.
Introduce everyone else to this series, or people who are already fans of it, they can come by and enjoy.
Zareen had to throw her arms around his waist to keep from being tossed over the Dun's crupper. He thought she was laughing. Chapter 42. Easing the Badger. The hubbub of the city quickly submerged Zareen's laughter, if that was what it was, beneath all the clamor that Perrin remembered from Caemlyn and Cairhien. The sounds were different here, slower and pitched differently, but they were the same, too. Boots and wheels and hooves on rough, uneven paving stones, cart and wagon axles squealing, music and song and laughter drifting from inns and taverns. Voices, a hum of voices like putting his head into a giant beehive. A great city living. From down a side street he heard the clang of hammer on anvil and shifted his shoulders unconsciously. He missed the hammer and tongs in his hands, the white-hot metal giving off sparks as his blows shaped it. The smithy sounds faded behind, buried under the rumble of carts and wagons and the babble of shopkeepers and people in the streets. Under all the smells of people and horses, cooking and baking, and 100 scents he had found peculiar to cities, lay the smell of marsh and salt water. He was surprised the first time they came to a bridge inside the city, a low arch of stone over a waterway no more than 30 paces across. But by the third such bridge, he realized that Ilion was crisscrossed by as many canals as streets, with men pulling laden barges as often as plying whips to move heavy wagons. Sedan chairs wove through the crowds in the streets, and occasionally the lacquered coach of some wealthy merchant or noble, with crest or house sign painted large on the doors. Many of the men wore peculiar beards that left their upper lip bare, while the women seemed to favor hats with wide brims and attached scarves that they wound around their necks. Once they crossed a great square, Many hides and extant, surrounded by huge columns of white marble, at least 15 spans tall and 2 spans thick, supporting nothing but a wreath of carved olive branches at the top of each. A huge white palace stood at either end of the square, each all columned walks and airy balconies, slender towers and purple roofs. Each reflected the other exactly, at first glance, but then Perrin realized that one was just a fraction smaller in each dimension, its towers perhaps less than a pace shorter. The king's palace, Zareen said against his back, and the great hall of the council. It is said the first king of Ilion said the Council of Nine could have any palace they wished, just as long as they did not try to build one larger than his. So the council copied the king's palace exactly, but 2 feet smaller in every measurement. That has been the way of Ilion ever since. The king and the Council of Nine duel with each other, and the assemblage struggles with both. And so while they carry on their battles, the people live much as they wish, with none to look over their shoulders too much. It is not a bad way to live, if you must be tied to one city. You would also like to know, I think, blacksmith, that this is the square of Tammuz, where I took the hunter's oath. I think I will end up teaching you so much no one will notice the hay in your hair. Perrin held his tongue with an effort, resolving not to stare so openly again. No one seemed to take Loyal as anything much out of the ordinary. A few people looked at him twice, and some children scampered along in their wake for a time, but it appeared that Ogier were not uncommon in Ilion. None of the folk seemed to notice the heat or the damp either. For once, Loyal did not appear pleased with the people's acceptance. His long eyebrows drooped down on his cheeks, and his ears had wilted, though Perrin was not sure that was not just the air. His own shirt clung to him with a mixture of sweat and the damp air. "Are you afraid you'll find other Ogier here, Loyal?" he asked. He felt Zareen stir against his back and cursed his tongue. He meant to let the woman know even less than Moraine apparently meant to tell her. That way, perhaps, she would grow bored enough to leave. If Moraine will let her go now. Burn me, I don't want any bloody falcon perched on my shoulder, even if she is pretty. Loyal nodded.
"Our stonemasons sometimes come here."
He spoke in a whisper, not only for an Ogier, but for anyone. Even Perrin could barely hear.
"From Stedding Shangtai, I mean. It was masons from our Stedding who built part of Ilion, the palace of the assemblage, the great hall of the council, some of the others. And they always send to us when repairs need to be done. Perrin, if there are Ogier here, they will make me go back to the Stedding. I should have thought of it before now. This place makes me uneasy, Perrin."
His ears shifted nervously. Perrin moved a step closer and reached up to pat Loyal's shoulder. It was a long reach, above his head. Conscious of Zareen at his back, he chose his words carefully. "Loyal, I do not believe Moraine would let them take you. You have been with us a long time, and she seems to want you with us. She will not let them take you, Loyal."
Hey, Babylon, how you doing?
He wondered suddenly.
Good to see
She
you.
keeps me because she thinks I may be important to Rand, and maybe because she doesn't want me telling what I know to anyone.
Hope you're
Maybe
doing
that's why she
well.
wants him to stay.
"Of course she would not,"
Loyal said in a slightly stronger voice, and his ears perked up.
"I am very useful after all. She may need to travel the ways again, and she could not without me."
Zareen shifted against Perrin's back, and he shook his head, trying to catch Loyal's eye. But Loyal was not looking.
Hell yeah.
He seemed to have
That's what
just
I'm
heard what
doing.
he had said, and the tufts on his ears had
Smoking
fallen
and
a little.
"I do hope it's not that."
listening to a book until I get tired
He
enough
looked at
so I
the city
can
around them, and his ears went all the way back down.
"I do not like this
lay
place,
down and go to
Perrin.
sleep. That don't count.
Moraine rode closer to Lan and spoke softly, but Perrin managed to catch her words. "Something is wrong in this city." The warder nodded. Perrin felt an itch between his shoulders. The Aes Sedai had sounded grim. First Loyal, and now her. What don't I see? The sun shone down on the sparkling roof tiles, made reflections from pale stone walls. Those buildings looked as if they might be cool inside. The buildings were clean and bright, and so were the people. The people. At first he saw nothing out of the ordinary. Men and women moving about their business, purposeful, but slower than he was used to further north. He thought it might be the heat and the bright sun. Then he spotted a baker's lad trotting down the street with a big tray of fresh loaves balanced on his head. The young fellow wore a grimace on his face that was nearly a snarl. A woman in front of a weaver's shop looked as if she might bite the man holding up the bright-colored bolts for her inspection. A juggler on a corner ground his teeth and stared at the folk who tossed coins into the cap lying in front of him, as if he hated them. Not everyone looked so, but it seemed to him that at least one face in 5 wore anger and hatred. And he did not think they were even aware of it. "What is the matter?" Zareen asked. "You are tensing. It is like holding onto a rock." "Something is wrong," he told her. "I do not know what, but something is wrong." Loyal nodded sadly and murmured about how they would make him go back. The buildings around them began to change as they rode, crossing more bridges as they crossed Ilion to its other side. The pale stone was as often undressed as polished now. The towers and palaces vanished to be replaced by inns and warehouses. Many of the men in the streets, and some of the women, had an oddly rolling gait. They all had the bare feet he associated with sailors. The smells of pitch and hemp were strong in the air, and the scent of wood was freshly cut and pure, with sour mud overlying both. The canal's odors changed too, making his nose wrinkle. Chamber pots, he thought. Chamber pots and
make sure I don't spill it.
It made him feel queasy. "The Bridge of Flowers," Lan announced as they crossed yet another low bridge. He inhaled deeply. "And now we are in the perfumed quarter. The Ilioners are a poetic people." Zareen stifled a laugh against Perrin's back. As if he were suddenly impatient with the slow pace of Ilion, the water led them quickly through the streets to an inn, 2 stories of rough green-veined stone, topped with pale green tiles. Evening was coming on, the light growing softer as the sun settled. It gave a little relief from the heat, but not much. Boys seated on mounting blocks in front of the inn to take their horses. One black-haired lad, about 10, asked Loyal if he were an Ogier, and when Loyal said he was, the boy said, "I did think you did be," with a self-satisfied nod. He led Loyal's big horse away, tossing the copper Loyal had given him into the air and catching it. Perrin frowned up at the inn sign for a moment before following the others in. A white-striped badger danced on its hind legs, with a man carrying what seemed to be a silver shovel. "Easing the badger," it read. It must be some story I never heard. The common room had sawdust on the floor, and tobacco smoke filled the air. It also smelled of wine and fish cooking in the kitchen, and a heavy, flowered perfume. The exposed beams of the high ceiling were rough-hewn and aged. This early in the evening, no more than a quarter of the stools and benches were filled by men in workmen's plain coats and vests, some with the bare feet of sailors. All of them sat clustered as best they could manage around one table, where a pretty black-eyed girl, the wearer of the perfume, sang to the strumming of a 12-string bittern and danced on the tabletop with swirls of her skirt. Her loose white blouse had an extremely low neck. Perrin recognized the tune, the Dancing Lass, but the words the girl sang were different from what he knew.
Definitely appreciated Southsider.
Girl, she came
appreciated
to
everyone
town
stopped
to see
by.
what she could see.
Especially
With a wink of her eye and a smile on her lips,
considering how late I do
a
it.
boy or three. With an ankle slim and skin so
Or
pale,
should I say I do my
the
life?
ship. With a soft little sigh and a gay little laugh, she made her way so free. She rushed into another verse, when Perrin realized what she was singing. It was too hot. He thought nothing could shock him after seeing girls dance, but that had only hinted at things. This girl was singing them right out. Zareen was nodding in time to the music and grinning. Her grin widened when she looked at him. "Why, farm boy, I did not think I ever knew a man your age who could still blush." He glared at her and barely stopped himself from saying something he knew would be. "This bloody woman has me jumping before I can think. I'll wager she thinks I'm a little girl." He tried not to listen to any more of what the girl was singing. If he could not get the red out of his face, Zareen was sure to make more of it. A flash of startlement had passed across the face of the first when they entered. A large, round woman with her hair in a thick roll at the back of her neck and the smell of strong soap about her. She suppressed her surprise quickly, though, and hurried to Moraine. "Mistress Murray," she said, "I did never think to see you here today." She hesitated, eyeing Perrin and Zareen, glanced once at Loyal, but not in the searching way she looked at them. Her eyes actually brightened at the sight of the ogre, but her real attention was on Mistress Murray. She lowered her voice. "Have my pigeons not arrived, say?" Bland, she seemed to accept Moraine. "I'm sure they have, Nita," Moraine said. "I have been away, but I am sure Adina has noted down everything you reported." She eyed the girl singing on the table with no outward disapproval or any other expression. "The badger was considerably quieter when last I was here." "Aye, Mistress. It did be, but the louds have no gotten over the it does seem. I have no had a fight with the badger in 10 years, till the tape is done." She nodded toward the one man not sitting near the singer, a fellow even bigger than Perrin, standing against the wall with his thick arms folded, tapping his foot to the music. "Even Billy did have a hard time keeping them down. So I did hire the girl to take their minds from anger.
Right.
From some place in Altara she does come." She tilted her head, listening. "A fair voice. But I did sing it better, aye, and dance better, too. Perrin gaped at the thought of this huge woman capering on the table, singing that song. A bit of it came through. "I'll wear no shift at all, until Zareen fisted him hard in the short ribs. He grunted. Nita looked his way. "I'll mix you some honey and sulphur, lad, for that throat. You'll no want to take a chill before the winter warms. No with a pretty girl like that one on your arm."
Excuse me.
Moraine gave him a look that said he was interfering with her. "Strange that you should suffer fights," she said. "I well remember how your nephew stops such. Has something occurred to make people more irritable?" Nita mused for a moment. "Perhaps. It do be hard to say. The young lordlings do always come down to the docks for the wenching and carousing they can no get away with where the air does smell fresher. Perhaps they do come here more often now, hard of the winter. And others do snap at each other more too. It did be a hard winter. That does make men angrier, and women as well. All that rain and cold. Why, I did wake 2 mornings to find ice in my wash basin. Not so hard as the last winter, of course, but that did be a winter for 1,000 years. Almost enough to make me believe those travelers' tales of frozen water falling from the sky." She giggled to show how little she believed that. It was an odd sound from such a large woman. Perrin shook his head. "She doesn't believe in snow." But if she thought this weather was cool, he could believe it of her. Moraine bent her head in thought, her hood shadowing her face. The girl on the table was beginning a new verse, and Perrin found himself listening in spite of himself. He had never heard of any woman doing anything remotely like what the girl was singing about, but it did sound interesting. He noticed Zareen watching him listen and tried to pretend he had not been. "What has occurred out of the ordinary in Ilion of late?" Moraine said finally. "I do suppose you could call Dragon's ascension to the Council of 9 unusual," Nita said. "Fortune prick me, I can no remember ever hearing his name before the winter, but he did come to the city, from somewhere near the Mirandian border, it be rumored, and did be raised inside a week. It do be said he be a good man, and strongest of the 9. They all do follow his lead, it be said, though he be newest and unknown. But sometimes I do have strange dreams of him." Moraine had opened her mouth to tell Nita she had meant in the last few nights, Perrin was sure, but she hesitated and instead said, "What sort of strange dreams, Nita?" "Oh, foolishness, Mistress Murray. Just foolishness. You do truly wish to hear it? Dreams of Lord Brand in strange places and walking bridges hanging in air. All fog these dreams do be, but near every night they do come. Did you ever hear of such? Foolishness, fortune pricked me. Yet it do be odd. Billy does say he does dream the same dreams. I do think he does hear my dreams and copy them. Maybe none too bright sometimes, I do think. You may do him an injustice, Moraine breathed.
Hey, Dream Warrior, how you doing?
Her dark hood. She had sounded shaken, even more shaken than when she thought a new false dragon had risen in Gillidan.
Hope you're doing well.
He could not smell fear, but Moraine was frightened. It was a far more terrifying thought than Moraine angry. He could imagine her angry.
You know, let's go ahead and do this. Since you've been here several times already.
How I do monder on, Nita said, patting the rolled hair.
There you go, Dream Warrior.
As if my foolish dreams do be important. She giggled again.
I'm not doing too bad. I can't complain.
Not as foolish as believing in snow. You do sound tired, Mr. Smarty. I will show you to your rooms. And then a good meal of fresh caught red stripe.
How you been doing?
Red stripe?
And definitely good to see you.
It must be. He could smell fish cooking. Rooms, Moraine said.
Ain't no problem.
Yes, we will take rooms.
You've been here
can wait.
On more than one occasion. You've been here several
Nita,
times.
Ships sail for Tyr? Early in the morning.
And you show it when it's
I have that which I must do
as late as it is, so
Bland glanced at
I always appreciate people who come this late and
for Tyr, Mr.
come back for more.
Nita laughed. Why, none for Tyr. The Nine did forbid any ship to sail for Tyr a month gone now, nor any from Tyr to call here, though I do think the sea folk paid no mind. But there do be no sea folk ship in the harbor. It do be odd that. The Order of the Nine, I do mean. And the king silent on it, when he does always raise his voice if they but take a step without his lead. Or perhaps it be no that, exactly. All talk do be of war with Tyr, but the boatmen and wagoneers who do carry supplies to the army do say the soldiers do all look north to Murandy.
Hell yeah. Dream Warrior, definitely appreciate it.
Moraine said in a tight voice.
That's why I do it.
We will do what we must.
It's pretty much
the rooms need it.
What I do at night to help me sleep, because I have trouble sleeping. I'll sit here.
Was more comfortable than he expected, given the look of the
listen to a book with y'all.
The bed was
smoke
wide,
a little bit until
the door was made
I get to where I can lay down and
when he opened the windows, a breeze crossed the room, carrying the smells of the harbor. And something of the canals, too, but at least it was cooling. He hung his cloak on a peg along with his quiver and dropped his bow in the corner. Everything else he left in the saddlebags and blanket roll. The night might not be restful. If Moraine had sounded afraid before, it had been nothing to when she said that something must be done tonight. For an instant, then, fear scent had steamed from her, as from a woman announcing that she was going to stick her hand in a hornet's nest and crush them with her bare fingers. What in the light is she up to? If Moraine is frightened, I should be terrified. He was not, he realized, not terrified or even frightened. He felt excited, ready for something to happen, almost eager, determined. He recognized the feelings. They were what wolves felt just before they fought. Burn me, I'd rather be afraid. He was first back down to the common room except for Loyal. Nita had arranged a large table for them, with ladder-backed chairs instead of benches. She had even found a chair big enough for Loyal. The girl across the room was singing a song about a rich merchant who, having just lost his team of horses in an improbable way, had for some reason decided to pull his carriage himself. The men listening around her roared with laughter. The windows showed darkness coming on more quickly than he had expected. The air smelled as if it might be making up to rain.
This inn has an ogier room,
Loyal said as Perrin sat down.
Apparently, every Ilion has one in hopes of gaining ogier custom when the stonemasons come. Nita claims it is lucky having an ogier under the roof. I cannot think they get ready. The masons always stay together when they go outside to work. Humans are so hasty, and the elders are always afraid tempers will flare and someone will put a long handle on his axe.
He eyed the men around the singer as if he suspected them of it. His ears were drooping again. The rich merchant was in the process of losing his carriage to more laughter. Did you find out whether any Ogier from Stedding Shangtai are in Ilion?
There were, but Nita said they left during the winter. She said they had not finished their work. I do not understand it. The masons would not have left work undone unless they were not paid, and Nita said it was not that. One morning they were just gone, though someone saw them walking down the Moreto Causeway in the night. Aaron, I do not like this city. I do not know why, but it makes me uneasy.
Ogier, Moraine said, are sensitive to some things. She still had her face hidden, but Nita had apparently sent someone to buy her a light cloak of dark blue linen. The fear smell was gone from her, but her voice sounded under tight control. Lan held her chair for her. His eyes looked worried. Zareen was the last down, running her fingers through just-washed hair. The herbal scent was stronger around her than before. She stared at the platter Nita placed on the table and muttered under her breath, I hate fish. The stout woman had brought all the food on a small cart with shelves. It was dusty in places, as if it had been hastily brought out from the storeroom in Moraine's honor. The dishes were seafolk porcelain, too, if chipped. Eat, Moraine said, looking straight at Zareen. Remember that any meal can be your last. You chose to travel with us, so tonight you will eat fish. Tomorrow you may die. Aaron did not recognize the nearly round white fish with red stripes, but they smelled good. He lifted two onto his plate with the serving fork and grinned at Zareen around a mouthful. They tasted good, too, lightly spiced. Eat your nasty fish, Falcon, he thought. He also thought that Zareen looked as if she might bite him. Do you wish me to stop the girl singing, Mistress Mari? Nita asked. She was setting bowls of peas and some sort of stiff yellow mush on the table. So you can eat in quiet. Staring at her plate, Moraine did not seem to hear. Lan listened a moment. The merchant had already lost, in succession, his carriage, his cloak, his boots, his gold, and the rest of his clothes, and was now reduced to wrestling a pig for its dinner, and shook his head. She will not bother us. He looked close to smiling for a moment before he glanced at Moraine. Then the worry returned to his eyes. What is wrong? Zareen said. She was ignoring the fish. I know something is. I have not seen that much expression on you, Stoneface, since I met you. No questions, Moraine said sharply. You will know what I tell you and no more. What will you tell me? Zareen demanded. The Aes Sedai smiled. Eat your fish. The meal went on in near silence after that, except for the songs drifting across the room. There was one about a rich man whose wife and daughters made a fool of him time and again without ever deflating his self-importance. Another that concerned a young woman who decided to take a walk without any clothes. And one that told of a blacksmith who managed to shoe himself instead of the horse. Zareen nearly choked, laughing at that one. Forgot herself enough to take a bite of fish and suddenly grimaced as if she had put mud in her mouth. I won't laugh at her, Aaron told himself. However foolish she looks, I'll show her what manners are. They taste good, don't they? He said. Zareen gave him a bitter look, and Moraine a frown for interrupting her thoughts. And that was all the talk there was. Nita was clearing away the dishes and setting an array of cheeses on the table, when a stink of something vile lifted the hackles on the back of Perrin's neck. It was a smell of something that should not be, and he had smelled it twice before. He peered about the common room uneasily. The girl still sang to the knot of listeners. Some men were strolling across the floor from the door, and Billy still leaned on the wall, tapping his foot to the sounds of the bittern. Nita patted her rolled hair, gave the room a quick glance, and turned to push the cart away. He looked at his companions. Loyal, unsurprisingly, had pulled the book from his coat pocket and seemed to have forgotten where he was. Zareen, absently rolling a piece of white cheese into a ball, was eyeing first Perrin, then Moraine, then him again, while trying to pretend she was not. It was Lan and Moraine he was really interested in, though. They could sense a Myrddraal or a Trolloc or any shadow spawn before it came closer than a few hundred paces. But the Aes Sedai was staring distantly at the table in front of her, and the warder was cutting a chunk of yellow cheese and watching her. Yet the smell of wrongness was there, as at Jara and the edge of Remen. This time it was not going away. It seemed to be coming from something within the common room. He studied the room again. Billy leaned against the wall, some men crossing the floor, the girl singing on the table, all the laughing men sitting around her. Then crossing the floor, he frowned at them. 6 men with ordinary faces walking toward where he was sitting. Very ordinary faces. He was just starting to re-inspect the men, listening to the girl, when suddenly it came to him that the stink of wrongness was rolling from the 6. Abruptly, they had daggers in their hands, as if they had realized he had seen them. "They have knives!" he roared, and threw the cheese platter at them. The common room erupted into confusion, men shouting, the singer screaming, Nita shouting for Billy, everything happening at once. Lan leaped to his feet, and a ball of fire darted from Moraine's hand, and Loyal snatched up his chair like a club, and Zareen danced to one side, cursing. She had a knife in her hand, too, but Perrin was too busy to notice much of what anyone else did. Those men seemed to be looking straight at him, and his axe was hanging from a peg up in his room. Seizing a chair, he ripped off a thick chair leg that ran up to make one side of the ladder back, hurled the rest of the chair at the men, and set about him with his long bludgeon. They were trying to reach him with their naked steel, as if Lan and the others were only obstacles in their way. It was a tight tangle where all he could manage was to knock blades away from him, and his wilder swings threatened Lan and Loyal and Zareen as much as any of his 6 attackers. From the corner of his eye, he saw Moraine standing to one side, frustration on her face. They were all so mixed together that she could do nothing without endangering friend as well as foe. None of the knife-wielders as much as glanced at her. She was not between them and Perrin. Panting, he managed to crack one of the ordinary-looking men across the head so hard that he heard bones splinter, and abruptly realized they were all down. It all seemed to him to have gone on for a quarter of an hour or more, but he saw that Billy was just halting, his large hands working as he stared at the 6 men sprawled dead on the floor. Billy had not even had time to reach the fight before it was done. Lan wore a face even grimmer than usual. He began searching the bodies thoroughly, but with a quickness that spoke of distaste. Lloyd still had his chair raised to swing. He gave a start and set it down with an embarrassed grin. Moraine was staring at Perrin, and so was Zareen as she retrieved her knife from the chest of one of the dead men. That stench of wrongness was gone, as if it had died with them. "Gray man," the Aes Sedai said softly. "And after you." "Gray men?" Nita laughed, both loud and nervously. "Why, Mistress Mari, next you'll say you do believe in boggles and bugbears and fetches, and old Grim riding with the black dogs in the wild hunt." Some of the men who had been listening to the songs laughed too, though they looked as uneasily at Moraine as at the dead men. The singer stared at Moraine as well, her eyes wide. Perrin remembered that one ball of fire before everything grew too jumbled. One of the gray men had a somewhat charred look about him, and gave off a sickly, sweet, burned smell. Moraine turned from Perrin to the stout woman. "A man may walk in the shadow," the Aes Sedai said calmly, "without being shadow spawn." "Oh, aye. Dark friends." Nita put her hands on generous hips and frowned at the corpses. Lan had finished his searching. He glanced at Moraine and shook his head, as if he had not really expected to find anything. "More likely thieves, though I did never hear of thieves bold enough to come right into an inn. I did never have even one killing in the Badger before. Billy, clear these out, into a canal, and put down fresh sawdust. The back way, mind. I do not want the watch putting their long noses into the Badger." Billy nodded as if eager to be useful after failing to take a hand earlier. He grabbed a dead man by the belt in either hand and carried them back toward the kitchen. "Aes Sedai," the dark-eyed singer said. "I did not mean to offend with my common songs." She was covering the exposed part of her bosom, which was most of it, with her hands. "I can sing others, if you so like." "Sing whatever you wish, girl," Moraine told her. The White Tower is not so isolated from the world as you seem to think, and I have heard rougher songs than you would sing." Even so, she did not look pleased that the common now knew she was Aes Sedai. She glanced at Lan, gathered the linen cloak around her, and started for the door. The warder moved quickly to intercept her, and they spoke quietly in front of the door. But Perrin could hear as well as if they had whispered right next to him. "Did you mean to go without me?" Lan said. "I pledged to keep you whole, Moraine, when I took your bond." "You have always known there were some dangers you are not equipped to handle, my guidine. I must go alone." "Moraine," she cut him off. "Heed me, Lan. Should I fail, you will know it, and you will be compelled to return to the White Tower. I would not change that, even if I had time. I do not mean you to die in a vain attempt to avenge me. Take Perrin with you. It seems the Shadow has made his importance in the pattern known to me, if not clear. I was a fool. Rand is so strongly Taviran that I ignored what it must mean that he had two others close by him. With Perrin and Mat, the Amerlin may still be able to affect the course of events. With Rand loose, she will have to. Tell her what has happened, my guidine." "You speak as if you are already dead," Lan said roughly. "The wheel weaves as the wheel wills. The shadow darkens the world. Heed me, Lan, and obey as you swore to." With that, she was gone. Chapter 43. Shadow Brothers. The dark-eyed girl climbed back on her table and started singing again in an unsteady voice. The tune was one Perrin knew as Mistress Ainora's Rooster, and though the words were different once more, to his disappointment and embarrassment that he was disappointed, it actually was about a rooster. Mistress Luhan herself would not have disapproved. Light, I'm getting as bad as mad. None of the listeners complained. Some of the men did look a bit disgruntled, but they seemed to be as anxious about what Moraine might approve as the singer was. No one wished to offend an Aes Sedai, even with her gone. Billy came back and hoisted 2 more gray men. A few of the men listening to the song glanced at the corpses and shook their heads. One of them spat on the sawdust. Lan came to stand in front of Perrin. "How did you know them, blacksmith?" he asked quietly. "Their taint of evil is not strong enough for Moraine or me to sense. Gray men have walked past 100 guards without being noticed, and warders among them." Very conscious of Zarene's eyes on him, Perrin tried to make his voice even softer than Lan's. I smelled them. I've smelled them before at Jara and at Remen, but it always vanished. They were gone before we got there both times." He was not sure whether Zarene had overheard or not. She was leaning forward, trying to listen and trying to appear not to at the same time. "Following Rand, then. Following you now, blacksmith." The warder gave no visible sign of surprise. He raised his voice to a more normal level. "I'm going to look around outside, blacksmith. Your eyes might see something I miss." Perrin nodded. It was a measure of the warder's worry that he asked for help. "Ogier, your folks see better than most, too."
"Oh,
Boyle said.
Well, I suppose I could take a look, too."
His big round eyes rolled sideways toward the 2 gray men still on the floor.
"I would not think any more of them were out there, would you?"
"What are we looking for, Stoneface?" Zarene said. Lan eyed her for a moment, then shook his head as if he had decided not to say something. "Whatever we find, girl. I will know it when I see it." Perrin thought about going upstairs for his axe, but the warder made for the door, and he was not wearing his sword. He hardly needs it, Perrin thought grumpily. He is almost as dangerous without it as with. He held onto the chair leg as he followed. It was a relief to see that Zarene still had her knife in her hand. Thick black clouds were roiling overhead. The street was as dark as late twilight, and empty of people who had apparently not waited to be caught in the rain. One fellow was running across a bridge down the street. He was the only person Perrin saw in any direction. The wind was picking up, blowing a rag along the uneven paving stones. Another, caught under the edge of one of the mounting blocks, flapped with a small snapping sound. Thunder grumbled and rolled. Aaron wrinkled his nose. There was a smell of fireworks on that wind. No, not fireworks exactly. It was a burned sulfur sort of smell. Almost. Zareen tapped the chair leg in his hands with a knife blade. You really are strong, big man. You tore that chair apart as if it were made of twigs. Aaron grunted. He realized he was standing straighter and deliberately made himself slouch. Fool girl. Zareen laughed softly, and suddenly he did not know whether to straighten or stay as he was. Fool. This time he meant it for himself. You're supposed to be looking. For what? He did not see anything but the street, did not smell anything but the almost burned sulfur scent, and Zareen, of course. Loyal appeared to be wondering what it was he was looking for, too. He scratched his ear, peered one way down the street, then the other, then scratched the other ear. Then he stared up at the roof of the inn. Lan appeared from the alleyway beside the inn and moved out into the street, eyes studying the darker shadows along the buildings. Maybe he missed seeing something, Aaron muttered, though he found it hard to believe, and turned toward the alley. I am supposed to be looking, so I'll look. Maybe he did miss something. Lan had stopped a little way down the street, staring at the paving stones in front of his feet. The warder started back toward the inn, walking quickly, but peering at the street ahead of him as if following something. Whatever it was led straight to one of the mounting blocks, almost beside the inn door. He stopped there, staring at the top of the gray stone block. Aaron decided to abandon going down the alley. It stank as much as the canals in this part of Ilion, for one thing, and walked over to Lan instead. He saw what the warder was staring at right away. Pressed into the top of the stone mounting block were two prints, as if a huge hound had rested its forepaws there. The smell that was almost burned sulfur was strongest here. Dogs don't make footprints in stone. Light, they don't. He could make out the trail Lan had followed, too. The hound had trotted up the street as far as the mounting block, then turned and gone back the way it had come, leaving tracks in the stone as if they had been a plowed field. They just don't. Darkhound, Lan said, and Zareen gasped. Loyal moaned softly, for no gear. A darkhound leaves no mark on dirt, blacksmith, not even on mud. But stone is another matter. There hasn't been a darkhound seen south of the Mountains of Doom since the Trolloc Wars. This one was hunting for something, I'd say. And now that it has found it, it is going to tell its master. Me, Aaron thought. Gray men and darkhounds hunting me? This is crazy. Are you telling me Nita was right? Zareen demanded in a shaky voice. Old Grim is really riding with the Wild Hunt? Light, I always thought it was just a story. Don't be a complete fool, girl, Lan said harshly. If the Dark One were free, we'd all be worse than dead by now. He peered off down the street, the way the tracks went. The Darkhounds are real enough, almost as dangerous as Murdral, and harder to kill. Now you bring fetches into it, Zareen muttered. Greymen, fetches, Darkhounds. You had better lead me to the Horn of Valir, farm boy. What other surprises do you have waiting for me? No questions. You still know little enough that Moraine will use from your oath you swear not to follow. I'll take that oath myself, and you can go now. You would be wise to give it. You will not frighten me away, Stoneface, Zareen said. I do not frighten easily. But she sounded frightened, and she said, I have a question, Aaron said, and I want an answer. You didn't send us this Darkhound, Lan, and neither did Moraine. Why not? The warder was silent for a time. The answer to that, blacksmith, he said grimly at last. Maybe more than you or I, either one, want to know. I hope the answer does not kill us all. You three get what sleep you can. I doubt we will stay the night in Ilion, and I think we're riding ahead. What are you going to do? Aaron asked. and going after Moraine to tell her about the Dark Hound. She can't be angry with me for following for that. Not when she would not know it was there until it took her throat. The first big drops of rain splattered on paving stones as they went back inside. Billy had removed the last of the dead graymen and was sweeping up the sawdust where they had bled. The dark-eyed girl was singing a sad song about a boy leaving his love. Mistress Luhan would have enjoyed it greatly. Lan ran ahead of them, across the common room and up the stairs. By the time Perrin reached the second floor, the water was already starting back down. Buckling his sword belt on, color-shifting cloak hanging over his arm, as if he hardly cared who saw it.
If he is wearing that in the city...
Loyal's shaggy hair almost brushed the ceiling as he shook his head.
I do not know if I can sleep, but I will try. Dreams will be more pleasant than staying awake.
Not always, Loyal, Perrin thought as the ogre went on down the hall. Zareen seemed to want to stay with him, but he told her to go to sleep and firmly shut the slatted door in her face. He stared at his own bed reluctantly as he stripped down to his underbreeches. I have to find out, he sighed, and crawled onto the bed. Rain drummed down outside and thunder boomed. The breeze across his bed carried some of the rain's coolness, but he did not think he would need any of the blankets at the foot of the mattress. His last thought before sleep claimed him was that he had forgotten to light a candle again, though the room was dark. Careless. Mustn't be careless. Carelessness ruins the work. Dreams tumbled through his head.
Oh shit, hell yeah.
Hounds chasing him.
That's pretty long,
them,
long one, but then again, I've watched, me and Most Hated Growers actually watched,
in richly embroidered coat and boots with
Lonesome Dove.
Most of the time, he held what seemed to be a sword, shining up the sun, and laughed triumphantly.
Which is pretty long.
Sometimes the man sat on a throne, and kings and queens grovelled before him.
And that's like frontier type shit.
Felt strange, as if they were not really his dreams.
And then we watched
then the dreams changed, and he knew he was in the
original
wolf dream he saw.
Stand.
This time he
Stephen King.
He stood atop a high, flat-topped stone spire, the wind ruffling his hair, bringing 1,000 dry scents and a faint hint of water hidden in the far distance. For an instant he thought he had the form of a wolf, and fumbled at his own body to make sure what he saw was really him. He wore his own coat and breeches and boots. He held his bow, and his quiver hung at his side. The axe was not there. Hopper! Hopper, where are you? The wolf did not come. Rugged mountains surrounded him, and other tall spires, separated by arid flats and jumbled ridges, and sometimes a large plateau rising with sheer sides. Things grew, but nothing lush. Tough, short grass. Bushes wiry and covered with thorn, and other things that even seemed to have thorns on their fat leaves. Scattered, stunted trees twisted by the wind. Yet wolves could find hunting even in this land. As he peered at this rough land, a circle of darkness suddenly blanked out a part of the mountains. He could not have said whether the darkness was right in front of his face or halfway to the mountains, but he seemed to be seeing through it and beyond. Matt rattling a dice cup. His opponent stared at Matt with eyes of fire. Matt did not seem to see the man, but Perrin knew him. Matt, he shouted. It's Baalzaman. Light, Matt, you're dicing with Baalzaman. Matt made his toss, and as the dice spun, the vision faded and the dark place was dry mountains again. Hopper! Perrin turned slowly, looking in every direction. He even looked up at the sky. He can fly now. Where clouds promised to rain, the ground far below the spire top would drink up as soon as it fell. Hopper! A darkness formed among the clouds, a hole into somewhere else. Egwene and Nynaeve and Elaine stood looking at a huge metal cage with a raised door held on a heavy spring. They stepped in and reached up together to loose the catch. The barred door snapped down behind them. A woman with her hair all in braids laughed at them, and another woman, all in white, laughed at her. The hole in the sky closed, and there were only clouds. Hopper! Where are you? He called. I need you, Hopper! And the grizzled wolf was there, alighting on the spire top as if he had leaped from somewhere higher. Dangerous. You have been warned, young bull. Too young. Too new yet. I need to know, Hopper. You said there were things I must see. I need to see more. Know more. He hesitated, thinking of Matt, of Egwene, and Nynaeve and Elaine. The strange things I see here, are they real?
Yeah, Dance of the Wolves, I
Hopper's
think, is
seemed slow, as if it were so simple
another
the wolf could not understand the need to explain
over
it
3
or
hour
how to.
long movie.
Finally, though, something came. What is real is not real.
Oh yeah, I read that version
what is
too.
Not real is real. Flesh
I
is
think
a
I got that done in about a
and
week.
Dreams have flesh. That doesn't tell me anything, Hopper. I do not understand. The wolf looked
Hell
at
yeah,
him as if he
Babylon.
had said he did not understand that water was wet.
That's a good collection to have.
You said I had to see something, and you showed me Balsamon.
I wish I could get away with
Heartfang, Moon Hunter.
Doing
Why did you show me
Stephen King on my evening ones like I do now.
The last hunt comes.
I can't do Stephen King
Sadness
ones.
They'll
go for about
what will be
an hour,
be.
maybe longer if I'm lucky, and
the last hunt?
YouTube will actually kill my stream
Hopper.
and delete my video because of copyright.
Not dead, hunt you? Yes, Greyman.
This is one of the few ones I could get away with.
A Darkhound was right outside the inn.
Stephen King.
I want to know why they're after me.
I can't. I wish I could, but
Hopper crouched, looking to either side as if
they
he
won't.
almost expected an attack.
Let me get away with it.
Long since we have seen the Shadow Brothers.
I got a good amount of his books on my Audible account. So
why are they after me?
I was going to try to do the
You do know. I know
the Dark Tower series.
Lee Young Bull.
Starting with the Gunslinger and
forepaws hitting Perrin's chest, knocking him back over the edge.
They didn't like that one.
Lead the Shadow Brothers.
They deleted my video.
The wind rushed in his ears as he fell. Hopper and the edge of the spire top dwindled above him. Why, Hopper? He shouted. I have to know why.
I don't want to do it too many times with at least with ones they do that too, because I don't want to get in trouble with my channel.
The ground below rushed up at him.
But this one,
he tensed against the crushing impact.
And a couple other ones I've been able to play.
He started awake, staring at the candle flickering on the small table beside the bed. Lightning flashes lit the window, and thunder rattled it. What did he mean, the last hunt?
But I've also done a lot of
I did not light any candle.
Public domain books too.
You talk to yourself and thresh in your sleep. He jumped and cursed himself for not having noticed the herbal scent in the air. Zareen sat on a stool at the edge of the candlelight, elbow on her knee, chin on her fist, watching him. You are Taviran, she said, as if ticking off a point. Stoneface thinks those odd eyes of yours can see things his can't. Gray men want to kill you. You travel with an Aes Sedai, a warder, and an Ogier. You free caged Aiel and kill white cloaks. Who are you, farm boy? The Dragon Reborn? Her voice said that was the most ridiculous thing she could think of, but he still stiffened uneasily. Whoever you are, big man, she added, you could do with a little more
books are
hair on
definitely
your
cool.
chest. He twisted around, cursing, and scrabbled rubber blankets over him to his neck.
At least most of the audio books
She keeps making me jump like a
on my
frog
Audible account. But my
Zareen's
friend
face was
actually
at the edge
gave
of
me
shadows. He could not see her clearly except
the
when
whole
lightning shone through
collection
the harsh
of the Dark
illumination
Tower
casting
series.
its own shadows across her strong nose
And they were
high
on
cheekbones. Suddenly, he remembered
cassette
men
tape.
saying he should run from a
And
beautiful
they're
woman.
actually
Once he had recognized
narrated by
Lanfear in that
Stephen
wolf
King.
dream, he had thought men must
But
mean
it's
her.
the
He
whole
did not
Dark
think it was
Tower
possible
series
for a
on
woman to be any more
audiobook,
beautiful
but
than Lanfear.
on cassette tape.
But she was just
Narrated by
Zareen was
Stephen
sitting there
King.
staring at him with those dark, tilted eyes, considering, weighing.
What's funny is
What are you doing here?
my friend that gave me that
What do you
series,
Who are you?
he is a boy he
She
has,
threw back her
his
head and
son.
laughed.
That's his name
I
is
am Aiel,
Roland.
farm boy, a hunter of the horn.
He named his son Roland,
your dreams?
Which I thought was pretty cool.
Why did you jump that way? You would think I'd goosed you. Before he could find words, the door crashed back against the wall, and Moraine stood in the doorway, her face as pale and grim as death. Your wolf dreams tell as truly as the dreamers, Perrin. The Forsaken are loose, and one of them rules in Ilion. Chapter 44. Hunted. Perrin climbed off the bed and started dressing, not caring whether Zareen was watching or not. He knew what he intended to do, but he asked Moraine anyway. Do we leave? Unless you want to make closer acquaintance with Samael, she said dryly. Thunder crashed overhead as if to punctuate her sentence, and lightning flashed. The Aes Sedai barely glanced at Zareen. Stuffing his shirt-tail into his breeches, he suddenly wished he had his coat and cloak on. Naming which one of the Forsaken it was made the room seem cold. Balsamon isn't bad enough. We have to have the Forsaken loose, too. Light. Does it even matter if we find Rand now? Is it too late? But he kept dressing, stamping his feet into his boots. It was that or give up, and Two Rivers folk were not known for giving up.
I have him,
Samael?
I have him in a plastic tote in our shed.
Rules.
I'll have to pull him out so I can show everyone.
Said softly.
Maybe.
I would not make you stay here.
Depends on how hot it is tomorrow.
But I will give you one last chance to
what
swear to
tote
go
I have
way
it
than
in.
I.
Could have been
hesitated,
like about 105 in the past couple of days.
Surely no one would choose to go with people who incurred the wrath of one of the Forsaken. Not now that she knew something of what they faced. Not unless she has a very good reason. For that matter, anyone who heard one of the Forsaken was loose should already be running for a sea folk ship and asking passage to the other side of the IU waste, not sitting there thinking. No, Zareen said finally, and he began to relax. No, I will not swear to go another way, whether you lead me to the Horn of Valir or not. Not even whoever does find the Horn will have a story such as this. I think this story will be told for the ages, Aes Sedai, and I will be part of it. No, Perrin snapped. That is not good enough. What do you want? I have no time for this bickering, Moraine broke in. Any moment, Lord Brand may learn that one of his dark hounds is dead. You can be sure he will know that means a warder, and he will come looking for the Guidene's Aes Sedai. Do you mean to sit here until he discovers where you are? Move, you foolish children! Move! She vanished down the hall before he could open his mouth. Zareen did not wait either, running from the room without her candle. Perrin hastily gathered his things and dashed for the back stairs, still buckling his axe belt around his waist. He caught up to Loyal going down, the Ogier trying to stuff a wood-bound book into his saddlebags and put on his cloak at the same time. Perrin gave him a hand with the cloak while they both ran down the stairs, and Zareen caught the pair of them before they could dash out into the pouring rain. Perrin hunched his shoulders against the wet and ran for the stable across the storm-darkened yard without waiting to pull up the hood of his cloak. She has to have a reason. Being in a bloody story isn't reason enough for any but a mad woman. The rain soaked his shaggy curls, laying them flat around his head.
Hey, Sports Talk, how you doing?
He darted through the stable door. Moraine was there before them, in an oiled cloak, still beaded with rain, and Nita holding a lantern for Lan to finish saddling the horses. There was an extra, a big gelding with an even stronger nose than Zareen's. I would have said pigeons every day, the stout woman was saying. No one will suspect me. Fortune pricked me. Even white cloaks do speak well of me. Listen to me, woman, Moraine snapped. This is not a white cloak or a dark friend I speak of. You will flee this city and make anyone you care for flee with you. For a dozen years you have obeyed me. Obey me now. Nita nodded, but reluctantly, and Moraine growled with exasperation. The bay is yours, girl, Lan said to Zareen. Get on his back. If you do not know how to ride, you must learn by doing or take my offer. Putting one hand on the high pommel, she vaulted easily into the saddle.
I've been pretty good.
On a horse
once, how about you?
Stone face, now that I think of it. She twisted around to tie her bundle behind her. What did you mean, Moraine? Perrin demanded as he tossed his saddlebag across Stepper's back. You said he would find out where I am. He knows. The Gray Man. Nita giggled, and he wondered irritably how much she really knew or believed among the things she said she did not believe in. Samael did not send the Gray Man. Moraine mounted Aldib with a cool, straight-backed precision, almost as if there were no hurry. The Darkhound was his, however. I believe it followed my trail. He would not have sent both. Someone wants you, but I do not think Samael even knows you exist. Yet. Perrin stopped with one foot in the stirrup, staring at her, but she seemed more concerned with patting her mare's arching neck than with the questions on his face.
Hey, Trizit, how you doing?
As well I went after you, Lance said, and the eyes
how you doing?
Loudly.
Hope you
I could wish you were a woman,
good.
Guidine. I would send you to the tower as a novice to learn to obey. He raised an eyebrow and touched the hilt of his sword, then swung into his saddle, and she sighed. Perhaps it is as well you are disobedient. Sometimes it is well. Besides, I do not think Shiriam and Swan Sanche together could teach you obedience. I do not understand, Perrin said. I seem to be saying that a great deal, and I'm tired of it.
Hell yeah, sports talk.
I can understand. He pulled himself the rest of the way up, so Moraine would not be looking down at him. She had enough advantage.
I have one too. I just haven't been on it lately. I've been
who did?
Doing other projects.
Or another Forsaken. He stopped to swallow. Another Forsaken? Light. If somebody else sent them, why did they not tell him? They're all dark friends, aren't they? And why me, Moraine? Why me? Rand is the bloody Dragon Reborn. He heard the gasps from Zareen and Nita, and only then realized what he had said. Moraine's stare seemed to skin him like the sharpest steel. Hasty bloody tongue. When did I stop thinking before I speak? It seemed to him it had happened when he first felt Zareen's eyes watching him. She was watching him now with her mouth hanging open. You are sealed to us now, Moraine told the bold-faced woman. There is no turning back from you, ever. Moraine looked as if she wanted to say something and was afraid to. She walked around and had already turned her attention elsewhere.
That sucks, bro.
Nita, flee Ilion tonight, in this hour. And hold your tongue even better than you have held it all these years. There are those who would cut out what you can say before I can even finish you.
Oh, not really.
Her tone left doubts as to exactly how she meant that, and Nita nodded vigorously.
I don't know about getting that. I don't think they have it out yet.
As for you, Perrin. The white mare moved closer, and he leaned back from the Aes Sedai despite all he could do. There are many threads woven in the pattern, and some are as black as the shadow itself. Take care one of them does not strangle you. The heels touched Aldib's flanks, and there headed into the rain, Mondar following close behind. Burn you, Moraine, Perrin thought as he rode after them. Sometimes I do not know which side you are on. He glanced at Zareen, riding beside him as if she had been born in a saddle. And whose side are you on? Rain kept people off the streets and canals, so no visible eyes watched them go. But it made the footing uncertain for the horses on the uneven paving stones. By the time they reached the Moredo Causeway, a wide road of packed dirt stretching north through the marsh,
there we go.
The downpour had begun to slacken. Thunder still boomed, but the lightning flashed far behind them, perhaps out to sea. Perrin felt a bit of luck was coming. The rain had stayed long enough to hide their departure, but now it seemed they would have a clear night for riding. He said as much, but Lan shook his head. Darkhounds like clear moonlit nights.
I will too.
Rain, the least.
Babylon.
A good thunderstorm can keep them away completely. As if his words had bidden it, the rain faded to a faint drizzle. Perrin heard Loyal groan behind him.
I have my munchie right here.
Causeway and marsh ended together, some 2 miles or so from the city, but the road kept on, slowly bearing a little eastward. Cloud-dark evening faded into night, and mist and rain continued. Moraine and Lan kept a steady, ground-eating pace. The horses' hooves splashed through puddles in the hard-packed dirt. The moon shone through gaps in the clouds. Low hills began to rise around them, and trees to appear more and more often. Perrin thought there must be forest ahead, but he was not sure.
Hey, Shorts, how you doing?
Woods could hide them from pursuit. Woods could let the pursuit come close before they saw. A thin howl rose far behind them. For a moment he thought it was a wolf. He surprised himself by nearly reaching out to the wolf before he could stop. The cry came again, and he knew it was no wolf. Others answered it, all miles behind. Eerie wails holding blood and death, cries that spoke of nightmares. To his surprise, Lan and Moraine slowed, the Aes Sedai studying the hills around them in the night. They are a long way, he said. They'll not catch us if we keep on. The Darkhounds? Serene muttered. Those are the Darkhounds? Are you sure it isn't the Wild Hunt Aes Sedai?
Hell yeah, sure. Definitely appreciate it.
It is. You can never outrun the Darkhounds, Blacksmith, Lan said. Not on the fastest horse. Always you must face them and defeat them, or they will pull you down.
I could have stayed in the steading, you know, Loyal said. My mother would have had me married by now, but it would not have been a bad life. Plenty of books. I did not have to come outside.
There, Moraine said, pointing to a tall, treeless mound well off to their right. There were
I don't
no
even
trees
play
that
much
Baron could see for
sports
200
games
paces or more around it
besides
either.
UFC.
And they were still sparse beyond that. We must see them coming to have a chance. The Darkhound's dire cries rose again, closer yet still far. Lan quickened Mondarb's pace a little, now that Moraine had chosen their ground. As they climbed, the horses' hooves clattered on rocks half buried in the dirt and slicked by the drizzle. To Perrin's eyes, most of them had too many squared corners to be natural. At the top, they dismounted around what seemed to be a low, rounded boulder.
You
The
still
moon
there,
appeared through a
Trizit?
gap in the clouds, and he found himself looking at a weathered stone face 2 paces long. A woman's face, he thought from the length of the hair. The Rainmaker seemed to be weeping. Moraine dismounted and stood looking off in the direction of the howls. She was a shadowed, hooded shape, rain-catching moonlight as it rolled
I don't play
down
much
their oiled
any sports
cloak.
games.
Loyal led his horse over to peer at the carving, then bent closer and felt
I'll
the
play
features.
Mortal Kombat, UFC,
I think she was an ogre,
He
wrestling,
said at last.
but this is not
but I
an
mean
old steading. I
Diablo,
would feel it. We all would.
Assassin's Creed,
And we would be safe from shadow spawn.
them types of games.
What are you two staring at? Zareen squinted at the rock. What is it? Her? Who?
Skyrim, that's a good
Many
one.
nations have risen and fallen since the breaking, Moraine said without turning. Some leaving no more than names on a yellowed page or lines on a tablet. Will we leave as much behind? The blood-drenched howls rose again, still closer. Perrin tried to calculate their pace and thought Lan had been right. The horses could not have outrun them after all. They would not have long to wait. Ogier, Lan said. You and the girl hold the horses. Zareen protested, but he rode straight over to her. Your knives
Yeah,
will
I
not
have
do much
4
good
and
here.
5.
His
Actually, I
sword
have
blade
all of
gleamed
them,
in the
but
moonlight as he drew it. Even this is
all
a
I
last
have
resort.
is
It sounds
4
like
and
10
5
out there, not
downloaded to my
1.
system.
Your work is to keep the horses from running when they smell the Darkhounds. Even Mondar does not like that smell. If the warder's sword was no good, then neither was the axe.
I'm mainly into
Perrin felt something near to relief
RPGs,
at that, even if they were shadow spawned.
fighting
He would not
games.
have to use the axe.
From not,
He
I
drew the
don't
length of his
play
unstrung bow from under
any
Stepper's
racing
saddle
games. I
girths.
don't play any sports games.
Maybe this will do some good. Try if you wish, Blacksmith, Lan said. They do not die easily. Perhaps you will kill one. Perrin drew a fresh bowstring from his pouch, trying to shield it from the soft rain. The beeswax coating was thin and not much protection against prolonged damp. Setting the bow slantwise between his legs, he bent it easily, fixing the loops of the bowstring into the horn nocks at the ends of the bow. When he straightened, he could see the Darkhounds.
No, I
They
don't
ran
have
like
Tweets.
horses
I
at a
don't have the
gallop.
newest
As he
one.
caught sight of them, they
I
gathered
have
speed.
the
They were
one
only
before
10
that.
large shapes running in the night, sweeping through the scattered trees. Yet
I
he pulled
used
the
to have
broad
it,
arrow from
but
his quiver,
I
nocked
sent
it,
it back.
but did not draw. He had been far from the best bowman in Emmons Field, but among the younger men, only Rand had been better. At 300 paces, he would shoot, he decided. Fool. You'd have a hard time hitting a target standing still at that distance. But if I wait, The way they are moving. Stepping up beside Moraine, he raised his bow. I just have to imagine that moving shadow was a big dog. Drew the goose feather fletchings to his ear and loosed. He was sure the shaft merged with the nearest shadow, but the only result was a snarl. It is not going to work. They're coming too fast. He was already drawing another arrow.
Sports talk, I do.
Why aren't you doing something, Moraine? He could see their eyes, shining like silver, their teeth gleaming like burnished steel. Black as the night itself and as big as small ponies, they sped toward him, silent now, seeking the
I don't
kill.
have them download to the system, but I have 4 and 5 on my system.
The horses whickered
but I have them on my library to where
warhorse.
I can download them if I wanted them.
He loosed again.
I've
The front
purchased them
faltered and
previously.
came on. They can die. He shot once more, and the lead darkhound tumbled, staggered to its feet, then fell. Yet even as it did, he knew a moment of despair. One down, and the other 9 had covered 2/3 of the distance already.
I create my
They
own
seemed to be
and
running even
dominate.
faster, like shadows flowing across the ground. One more arrow. Time for one more, maybe. Then it's the axe. Burn you, Aes Sedai. He drew again.
I take him to career mode and
Now, Moraine said as
work
his arrow
him
left
up
the bow. The air
complete
between her
career
hands
mode
caught
and
fire and streaked
use him
toward
as
the
a regular
darkhound's
fighter
vanquishing night.
on the
The
roster.
horses squealed and leaped against being held. Perrin threw an arm across his eyes to shield them from a white-hot glare, like
The
burning
fires I make,
like
I
a forge
usually
cracking open.
I'll knock him out or
Sudden noon
I'll
flared
twist
in the
him up
darkness and was gone.
make him tap.
When he uncovered his eyes, spots flickered across his vision, and the faint, fading image of that line of fire. Where the darkhounds had been was nothing but night-covered ground and the soft rain. The only shadows that moved were cast by clouds crossing the moon. I thought she'd throw fire at them or call lightning, but this... What was that? He asked hoarsely. Moraine was peering off toward Ilion again,
Yeah,
as if she could see
and
through all
no.
those miles of darkness. Perhaps he did not
he had
see,
some good
she said,
fights,
almost to
but he
herself.
hasn't fought in a while.
It is far.
Not
and
since he
was
broke
not
his
watching.
leg.
Perhaps he did not notice.
I
Who? Zareen demanded. Samael? Her voice shook a little. You said he was in Ilion. How could he see anything here? What did you do? Something forbidden, Moraine said coolly. Forbidden by vows almost as strong as the 3 oaths. She took Aldib's reins from the girl and patted the mare's neck, calming her. Something not used in nearly 2,000 years. Something I might be stilled just for knowing.
Perhaps,
Loyal's voice was a faint boom.
perhaps we should be going. There could be more.
I think not, the Aes Sedai said, mounting. He would not loose 2 packs at once, even if he has to. They would turn on each other instead of their prey. And I think we are not his main quarry, or he would have come himself. We were an annoyance, I think. Her tone was calm, but it was clear she did not like being regarded so lightly. And perhaps a little something extra to slip into his game bag, if we were not too much trouble. Still, there is small good in remaining any nearer him than we must. Rand? Perrin asked. He could almost feel Zareen leaning forward to listen. If we are not what he hunts, is it Rand? Perhaps, Moraine said, or perhaps Matt. Remember that he is Taviran also, and he blew the horn of Alir. Zareen made a strangled sound. He blew it? Someone has found it already? The Aes Sedai ignored her, leaning out of her saddle to stare closely into Perrin's eyes, dark gleaming into burnished gold. Once again, events outpace me. I do not like that. And neither should you. If events outrun me, they may well trample you and the rest of the world with you. We have many leagues to Tyr yet, Lan said. The Ogier's suggestion is a good one. He was already in his saddle. After a moment, Moraine straightened and touched the mare's ribs with her heels. She was halfway down the side of the mound before he could get his bow unstrung and take Stepper's reins from Loyal. Burn you, Moraine. I'll find some answers somewhere. Leaning back against a fallen log, Matt enjoyed the warmth of the campfire. The rains had drifted south 3 days earlier, but he still felt damp. Yet right at that moment, he was hardly aware of the dancing flames. He peered thoughtfully at the small, wax-covered cylinder in his hand. Tom was engrossed in tuning his harp, muttering to himself of rain and wet, never glancing Matt's way. Crickets chirped in the dark thicket around them. Caught between villages by sunset, they had chosen this copse away from the road. 2 nights they had tried to buy a room for the night. Twice a farmer had loosed his dogs on them. Matt unsheathed his belt knife and hesitated. Luck. It only
She was okay at when she
said.
first came out.
Luck.
Then she got kicked
As
in the
carefully
head.
as he could, he slid along the length of the tube. It was a tube, and of paper as he had thought. He found bits of paper on the
I
ground.
still remember
after
watching
fires
that
were set off
pay-per-view.
back home. Layers of paper, but
I was
all
actually
that
rooting
filled
for
the
her.
inside was something that looked like dirt, or maybe tiny gray-black pebbles and dust. He stirred them on his palm with one finger. How in the light could pebbles explode? The light burned me, Tom roared. He thrust his
She
harp
wasn't
into
too
its
good
case as
at
if to protect it from what was in Matt's
standing
hand.
and banging, but
Are you trying
if
to
she
kill
got
us,
hold
boy?
of you,
Haven't you
you're
heard
done.
those things explode 10 times as hard for air as for fire? Fireworks are the next thing to Aes Sedai work, boy. Maybe, Matt said.
By
But
Holly
Aludra
Holmes.
did not look like any Aes Sedai to me. I used to think that about Master Alvir's clock, that it had to be Aes Sedai work. But once I got the back of the cabinet open, I saw it was full of little pieces of metal. He shifted uncomfortably at the memory. Mistress Alvir had been the first to reach him that time, with the wisdom and his father and the mayor all right behind
But
her.
what you gotta understand
And
about
unbelieving,
Holly
it just
too,
meant
she
to look.
was
I could have put
she
them all
was
back
a
together.
pro boxer before she
I
got
think
into
Perrin could make
MMA.
one if he saw those little wheels
She
and
went from
springs,
boxing to
and I don't know what
kickboxing,
all.
and then went to
You
MMA.
would be surprised.
She has
boy,
multiple
Tom
belts
said
in both
proudly.
of those other ones.
Even a bad clockmaker
So
is a
she
fairly
was
rich
able to
man,
throw.
and they earn it. But a clock does not explode in your face. Neither did this.
Hey Sam Squash, how you
Well,
doing?
it is useless now. He tossed a handful of paper and little pebbles into the fire.
I hope you're
With
doing
a
well,
screech
bro.
from Tom. The pebbles sparkled and made
And
tiny
good to see ya.
flashes, and there was a smell of acrid smoke. You are trying to kill us. Tom's voice was unsteady, and it rose in intensity and pitch as he spoke. If I decide I want to die, I will go to the royal palace when we reach Camelin, and I'll pinch more days. His long mustaches flailed. Do not do that again. It did not explode, Matt said, frowning at the fire. He fished into the oiled cloth bowl on the other side of the log and pulled out a firework of the next larger size. I wonder why there was no bang. I do not care why there was no bang. Do not do it again. Matt glanced at him and laughed. Stop shaking, Tom. There's no need to be afraid. I know what is inside them now. At least I know what it looks like.
Oh shit,
But don't say it.
that's crazy.
I'll not be
Sam
cutting any
Squash.
more open, Tom. It is more fun to set them up. I am not afraid, you mud-footed swineherd, Tom said with elaborate dignity. I am shaking with rage because I'm traveling with a goat-brained lout who might kill the pair of us because he cannot think past his own. Ho! The fire! Matt exchanged glances with Tom as horses' hooves approached. It was late for anyone honest to be traveling, but the Queen's guards kept the road safe
Oh,
this close to
damn.
Camelin,
That's
and the
crazy,
four who
Sam
rode into the
Squash.
firelight certainly did not look like robbers. One was a woman. The men all wore long
Damn.
cloaks and
Yeah,
seemed
that
to be her
definitely sucked.
retainers,
Nothing light.
while she was pretty and blue-eyed and gold
That means
necklace
it's
and
gonna
a
be a
gray silk
mission.
dress
It's
and a
gonna
velvet cloak with a wide hood.
take
The men
some time.
dismounted. One held her reins and another her stirrup, and she smiled at Matt, doffing her gloves as she came near the fire. I fear we are
At least
caught
you have
out
a
late, young
bulldozer to
master,
help
she
you.
said, and I would trouble you for directions to an inn if you know one. He grinned and started to rise. He had made it as far as a crouch when he heard one of the men mutter something, and another produced a crossbow from under his cloak, already drawn with a clip holding the bolt. Kill him, fool! The woman shouted, and Matt tossed the firework into the flames and threw himself toward his quarterstaff. There was a loud bang and a flash of light. "Aye today!" a man cried. "Fireworks, fool!" the woman shouted. And he rolled to his feet with the staff in his hand to see the crossbow bolt sticking out of the fallen log almost where he had been sitting, and the crossbowman falling with the hilt of one of Tom's knives adorning his chest. It was all he had time to see, for the other two men darted past the fire at him, drawing swords. One of them suddenly stumbled to his knees, dropping his sword to claw at a knife in his back as he fell face down. The last man did not see his companion fall. He obviously expected to be one of a pair, dividing their opponent's attention as he thrust his blade at Matt's middle. Feeling almost contemptuous, Matt cracked the fellow's wrist with one end of his staff, sending the sword flying, and cracked his forehead with the other. The man's eyes rolled up in his head as he collapsed. From the corner of his eye, Matt saw the woman walking toward him, and he stuck a finger at her like a knife. "Fine clothes you wear for a thief, woman. You sit down till I decide what to do with you, or I'll—" She looked as surprised as Matt at the knife that suddenly bloomed in her throat, a red flower of spreading blood. He took a half step as if to catch her as she fell, knowing it was no good. Her long cloak settled over her, covering everything but her face and the hilt of Tom's knife. "Burn you," Matt muttered. "Burn you, Tom Maryland. A woman? Light, we could have tied her up and given her to the Queen's guards tomorrow in Camelin. Light, I might even have let her go. She'd rob nobody without these three, and the only one that lives will be days before he can see straight and months before he can hold a sword. Burn you, Tom, there was no need to kill her." The gleeman limped to where the woman lay and kicked back her cloak. The dagger had half fallen from her hand, its blade as wide as Matt's thumb and 2 hands long. "Would you rather I had waited till she nested that in your ribs, boy?" He retrieved his own knife, wiping the blade on her cloak. Matt realized he was humming "She Wore a Mask That Hid Her Face" and stopped it. He bent down and hid hers with the hood of her cloak. "Best we move on," he said quietly. "I do not want to have to explain this if a patrol of the guards happens by." "With her in those clothes," Tom said, "I should say not. They must have robbed a merchant's wife or some noblewoman's carriage." His voice became gentler. "If we're going, boy, you had best see to saddling your horse." Matt gave a start and pulled his eyes from the dead woman. "Yes, I had better, hadn't I?" He didn't look at her again. He had no such compunction about the men. As far as he was concerned, a man who decided to rob and kill deserved what he got when he lost the game. He did not dwell on them, but neither did he jerk his eyes away if they fell on one of the robbers. It was after he had saddled his gelding and tied his things on behind while he was kicking dirt onto the fire that he found himself looking at the man who had shot the crossbow. There was something familiar about those features, about the way the smothering fire made shadows across them. Luck, he told himself. Always the luck. "The crossbowman was a good swimmer, Tom," he said as he climbed into the saddle. "What foolery are you talking now?" The gleeman was on his horse, too, and far more concerned with how his instrument cases rode behind his saddle than he was with the dead. "How could you know whether he could swim at all?" "He made it ashore from a small boat in the middle of the Aranon in the middle of the night. I guess that used up all his luck." He checked the lashings on the roll of fireworks again. "That fool thought one of these was Aes Sedai. I wonder what he'd have thought if they all went off." "Are you sure, boy? The chances of it being the same man. Why, even you wouldn't lay a wager against those odds." "I am sure, Tom. Elaine, I will wring your neck when I put my hands on you. And Egwene's and Nynaeve's, too. And I am sure I intend to have this bloody letter out of my hands an hour after we reach Camelin." "I tell you there is nothing in that letter, boy. I played Deus Damar when I was younger than you, and I can recognize a code or a cipher even when I don't know what it says." "Well, I never played your great game, Tom, your bloody game of houses, but I know when someone is chasing me, and they'd not be chasing me this hard or this far for the gold in my pockets. Not for less than a chest full of gold. It has to be the letter. Burn me, pretty girls always get me in trouble." Do you feel like sleeping tonight after this? With the sleep of an innocent babe, boy. But if you want to ride, I'll ride. The face of a pretty woman floated into Matt's head with a dagger in her throat. You had no luck, pretty woman. Then let's ride, he said savagely. Chapter 45. Camelin. Matt had vague memories of Camelin, but when they approached it in the early hours after sunrise, it seemed as if he had never been there before. They had not been alone on the road since first light, and other riders surrounded them now, and trains of merchants' wagons and folk afoot, all streaming toward the great city. Built on rising hills, it was surely as large as Tarvalon, and outside the huge walls, a 50-foot height of pale grayish stone, streaked with white and silver sparkling in the sun, spaced with tall round towers, with the lion banner of Andor waving atop them, white on red. Outside those walls, it seemed as if another great city had been placed, wrapping around the walled city, all red brick and gray stone and white plastered walls. Inns pushed in on houses of 3 and 4 stories, so fine they must belong to wealthy merchants. Shops with goods displayed on tables under awnings crowding against wide windowless warehouses. Open markets under red and purple roof tiles lined the road on both sides, men and women already crying their wares, bargaining at the top of their voices, while penned calves and sheep and goats and pigs, caged geese and chickens and ducks added to the din. He seemed to remember thinking Camelin was too noisy when he was here before. Now it seemed like a heartbeat, pumping wealth. The road led to arched gates 20 feet high, standing open under the watchful eye of red-coated Queen's guards in their shining breastplates. They eyed Tom and him no more than anyone else. Not even the quarterstaff slanted across his saddle in front of him. All they cared was that people keep moving, it seemed, and then they were within. Slender towers here rose even taller than those along the walls, and gleaming domes shone white and gold above streets teeming with people. Just inside the gates, the road split into 2 parallel streets, separated by a wide strip of grass and trees. The hills of the city rose like steps toward a peak, which was surrounded by another wall, shining as white as Tarvalon's, with still more domes and towers within. That was the inner city, Matt recalled, and atop those highest hills stood the royal palace. No point waiting, he told Tom. I'll take the letter straight on. He looked at the sedan chairs and carriages making their way through the crowds, the shops with all their goods displayed. A man could earn some gold in this city, Tom, once he found a game of dice or cards. He was not quite so lucky at cards as at dice, but few except nobles and the wealthy played those games anyway. Now that's who I should find a game with. Tom yawned at him and hitched at his gleeman's cloak as if it were a blanket. We have ridden all night, boy. Let's at least find something to eat first. The Queen's blessing has good meals. He yawned again. And good beds. I remember that, Matt said slowly. He did, in a way. The innkeeper was a fat man with graying hair, Master Gill. Moraine had caught up to Rand and him there, when he had thought they were finally free of her. She's off playing her game with Rand now. Nothing to do with me, not anymore. I will meet you there, Tom. I said I'd have this letter out of my hands an hour after I arrived, and I mean to. You go on. Tom nodded and turned his horse aside, calling over his shoulder through a yawn. Do not become lost, boy. It's a big city, Camelin. And a rich one. Matt heeled his mount on up the crowded street. Lost. I can find my bloody way. The sickness appeared to have erased parts of his memory. He could look at an inn, its upper floors sticking out over the ground floor all the way around, and its sign creaking in the breeze, and remember seeing it before, yet not recall another thing he could see from that spot. 100 paces of street might abruptly spark in his memory, while the parts before and after remained as mysterious as dice still in the cup. Even with the holes in his memory, he was sure he had never been to the inner city or the royal palace. I couldn't forget that. Yet he did not need to remember the way. The streets of the new city, he remembered that name suddenly, it was the part of Camelin less than 2,000 years old, ran every which way, but the main boulevards all led to the inner city. The guards at the gates made no effort to stop anyone. Within those white walls were buildings that could have almost fit in Tarvalin.
1 second, I want to be
the
right
curving
back.
streets topped hills to reveal thin towers, their tiled walls sparkling with 100 colors in the sunlight, or to look down on parks laid out in patterns made to be viewed from above, or to show sweeping vistas across the entire city to the rolling plains and forests beyond. It did not really matter which streets he took. They all spiraled in on what he sought, the royal palace of Andor. In no time he found himself crossing the huge oval plaza before the palace, riding toward its tall gilded gates. The pure white palace of Andor would certainly not have been out of place among Tarvalin's wonders, with its slender towers and golden domes shining in the sun, its high balconies and intricate stonework. The gold leaf on one of those domes could have kept him in luxury for a year. There were fewer people in the plaza than elsewhere, as if it were reserved for great occasions. A dozen of the guards stood before the closed gates, bows slanted, all at exactly the same angle, across their gleaming breastplates, faces hidden by the steel bars of their burnished helmets' face guards. A heavy-set officer, with his red cloak thrown back to reveal a knot of gold braid on his shoulder, was walking up and down the line, eyeing each man as if he thought he might find rust or dust. Matt drew rein and put on a smile. "Good morning to you, Captain." The officer turned, staring at him through the bars of his face guard with deep, beady eyes like a pudgy rat in a cage. The man was older than he had expected, surely old enough to have more than one knot of rank, and fat rather than stocky. "What do you want, farmer?" he demanded roughly. Matt drew a breath. "Make it good. Impress this fool so he doesn't keep me waiting all day. I don't want to have to flash the Amerlin's paper around to keep from kicking my heels. I come from Tarvalin, from the White Tower, bearing a letter from—" "You come from Tarvalin, farmer?" The fat officer's stomach shook as he laughed, but then his laughter cut off as if severed with a knife, and he glared. "We want no letters from Tarvalin, rogue, if you have such a thing. Our good queen, may the light illumine her, will take no word from the White Tower until the daughter heir is returned to her. I never heard of any messenger from the tower wearing a countryman's coat and breeches. It is plain to me you are up to some trick, perhaps thinking you'll find a few coins if you come claiming to carry letters. But you'll be lucky if you don't end in a prison cell. If you do come from Tarvalin, go back and tell the tower to return the daughter heir before we come and take her. If you're a trickster after silver, get out of my sight before I have you beaten within an inch of your life. Either way, you half-wit looby, be gone." Matt had been trying to edge a word in from the beginning of the man's speech. He said quickly, "The letter is from her, man. It's from—" "Did I not tell you to be gone, ruffian?" the fat man bellowed. His face was growing nearly as red as his coat. "Take yourself out of my sight, you gutter scum! If you are not gone by the time I count 10, I will arrest you for littering the plaza with your presence. 1, 2. Can you count so high, you fat fool?" Matt snapped. "I tell you, Elaine said—" "Guards!" The officer's face was purple now. "Seize this man for a dark friend!" Matt hesitated a moment. Sure, no one could take such a charge seriously, but the red-coated guards dashed toward him, all dozen men in breastplates and helmets, and he wheeled his horse and galloped ahead of them, followed by the fat man's shouts. The gelding was no racer, but it outdistanced men afoot easily enough. People dodged out of his way along the curving streets, shaking fists after him and shouting as many curses as the officer had. "Fool," he thought, meaning the fat officer, then added another for himself. "All I had to do was say her bloody name in the beginning. Elaine, the daughter heir of Andor, sends this letter to her mother, Queen Morghese. Light! Who could have thought they'd think that way about Tarvalin?" From what he remembered of his...
All right, everyone, I'm gonna call. Excuse me, the end to this live for tonight. But I want to thank everyone for stopping by, and everyone continues to stop by. I definitely appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe out there.